colleagues. Hello, it is 2 o'clock in Skopje and in Geneva, and we are starting our training workshop. You all have seen the agenda. You all have seen the title, Online Training Workshop on Guidelines and Best Practices in North Macedonia for Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises in delivering energy efficient products and in providing renewable energy equipment. Before we go into the workshop itself, there will be a few housekeeping announcements. And for that, I give the floor to Alexander Demishkovsky. I haven't introduced myself, my apologies. I'm Oleg Zubinsky. I work for the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, Sustainable Energy Division. I'm regional advisor for energy at the UNECE. Alexander, could you make the announcements, please?
Thank you, Oleg. Hello to everyone from my side. There are a few basic housekeeping rules that we would like to turn your attention to today. First of all, there are translation on Macedonian and Albanian language available. The Macedonian language translation can be found under the Russian channel on your bottom right, on the bottom right of your screen, and the Albanian language translation can be found as the French title of the channel available also at the bottom end of your screen. For those that are participating in the panel discussions, please make sure to turn off your microphones while you're not speaking. And for everyone else that want to join the conversation, please either raise your hand, or if you have any questions for the panelists, share them in the Q&A section below at the bottom of your screen. Or if you have a technical question, please share it in the chat box below. For any other information, please contact us via the chat box field. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexander. So we are starting our workshop. It is jointly organized by UNECE and Undp in North Macedonia, and I would like to thank Sanja Bojanic, I would say my main co-organizer for this event. Let me start with a little bit about the framework, if you wish, a little bit of the context on how this event came about. Last year, in response to the crisis that we had with the COVID-19 pandemic, UNECE became one of the implementing partners in the UN Development Account Project global initiative towards post-COVID-19 resurgence of the micro, small, and medium enterprises sector. Quite a big number of the UN system organizations participate in this project. It is led by our colleagues from UNTAD, this is UN Conference on Trade and Development, and ESCWA, Economic and Social Commission for Western Asia. So we at UNECE, UN Economic Commission for Europe, are also participating on several topics. And one of them is related to the work of micro, small, and medium enterprises in the area of energy efficiency and renewable energy. And as a result of this work, UNECE has produced guidelines and best practices for MSMEs in delivering energy efficient products and in providing renewable energy equipment. We now have a publication issued at the end of last year. And we also have with us today Andrei Dodonov, who was the main author of these guidelines and best practices. So the next stage of this project is customizing these guidelines and best practices for several countries in the UNECE region. And at the first instance, we have 2 countries for which this customization is being done, and they are North Macedonia and Georgia. And North Macedonia is the first one to complete this work. Our consultant is Sasha Panevsky. He's with us today. He will be, I would say, the main hero on the arena today. He will do the training course and make the presentation on the work that he has done. And we also have a colleague from Georgia, George Abulashvili. He is working on a similar project for Georgia. I think it would be quite interesting to see what are the similarities and differences between the two countries in terms of response to the COVID-19 crisis, specifically for MSMEs in energy efficiency and renewable energy. Without further ado, I would like to move now to the next. So I welcome all of you, and it's a great pleasure for me to participate in this workshop. I wish it could have been done in person. I would love to come to Skopje. I hope this will be possible sometime soon. We don't know, but let's hope so. And now the next one to speak is Alexander Dukovsky, who is the chair of the UNEC Group of Experts on Energy Efficiency, who is Macedonian. So I'm pretty sure he will have some views on what has been produced, both in his capacity as the chair of the Group of Experts and also as your compatriot. So Alexander, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Oleg, and thanks everybody for being here. I welcome you to what is a strange situation, because usually if this wasn't with the pandemic, we would have this in person, and then we would have shared more of the experiences that we had throughout this difficult year and a half. As Oleg mentioned, I am the chair of the group of experts, and we more or less carry out concrete and result-oriented activities with the aim to achieve specific objectives. And for us, those specific objectives is to improve energy efficiency in the UNEC region, and also to strengthen the regional cooperation in energy efficiency, which I would say that this event is actually helping to achieve these objectives. This workshop is something that it has been imposed on us because of the situation. Probably we would have not looked at effects of a pandemic or similar situation with regards to energy efficiency, renewable energy, and small and medium enterprises. But this situation actually put additional burden on us to explore what are the outcomes of similar situation, what could be done in the future to prevent the slowing down or collapses of the economic models, to devise new business models where we can actually contribute with energy efficiency and renewable energy to make betterment both in the living of our citizens as well as the enterprises that employ them. I believe that our consultant will have some interesting insights from what has happened in Macedonia, as well as the inputs that we are going to get from Georgia, as well as input from the whole UNEC region. And I hope that at the end we will have a productive discussion and see if some of these views of what has happened and what could happen, and how some of the enterprises have adapted to the situation, can be used to further strengthen both the resilience of the companies, as well as to put us to a path of more efficient future. I will not take long. I will try to get involved in the discussion after when we have the questions and answers. I would like to say again, thank you for being here. Thank you for showing the interest. And I will switch a little bit to Macedonia now. Мило ми е дека сте тука, мило ми е дека ќе може повеќе да соработуваме. Се надевам дека сите ние и од компаниите и владините представници и интернационалните организации ќе најдеме повеќе начини како да соработуваме меѓу нас и ќе ве молам за се што имате потреба, побарајте помош, затоа што секогаш има некој што ќе знае или да ви го пренесе своето знаење или како да ве донесе до знаењето кое ви треба, за да можете полесно да просперирате во следниот период, пост-ковид периодот што доаѓа. Благодарам уште еднаш. Thank you very much, and I will switch to the next welcoming speech. I believe it's from Sanya from UNDP. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexander. Very happy to have you here, and I understand that colleagues from North Macedonia quite enjoyed you switching to Macedonian. I now give the floor to Sanja Bojanic, who is the deputy resident representative at the UNDP North Macedonia. And in fact, I'm happy to say that thanks to this cooperation with UNDP, this workshop is, I would say, something more than it was envisioned before. And you will now hear from Sanja some ideas, some thoughts on what can be done for MSMEs and what can be done by MSMEs in the current situation, and how we can rebuild our economies better. I think that's what our cooperation is about. So, Sanja, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Oleg, for the introduction. Greetings to everybody. I will also say just a small bit in Macedonian. Добре дојдовте, многу ми е драго дека сме сите заедно тука. And then I will present in English. And really, Oleg, thank you for the introduction and for giving me the credit. I'm not sure, or actually I hope that the bigger picture I'm going to present will be interesting for all. But actually, when we originally discussed with Oleg about the event, I was thinking that in addition to having very specific industry and sectoral guidance, concrete examples that will be presented today by UNSCE, by Sasha, it would be interesting to hear a little bit about the bigger picture. And hence the title of my presentation is how this global EU and country energy transition agenda, together with COVID-19, are actually creating business opportunities for MSMEs in the energy efficiency and renewable energy. So this is what I would like to bring, kind of how all of these pieces fit together and how some of the problems, challenges that we have experienced in this, unfortunately, COVID era can actually be turned into opportunities. So with this, I would like to say, or to move to 5 key elements that I think are shaping the big picture. So it's, as I mentioned, COVID pandemics. It's the climate change, it's the EU Green Deal, and linked to that, just transition. It's SDGs and digitalization. And when we are talking about COVID pandemics or the impact of it, unfortunately, it has been impacting Macedonian economy quite severely. And we will be hearing from Alexander and from other speakers about some more general and specific impacts on the MSMEs. But I would like to emphasize that it's not only about economy. It's not only about the economic impact. It's very important to know that COVID pandemic actually emphasized the existing social problems and the existing social divides. It has really highlighted the power of digital, but then also very much highlighted how the digital divide, which is widening, can again have social and economic impacts on the most vulnerable. And then the third element is that somehow humanity's attention was again driven. It was, the chance for decades. It was the situation for decades, but now somehow climate change is taken more seriously. And we are understanding the pressures that we have been putting on the environment are actually seriously backfiring on us. So although COVID has brought actually a lot of bad stuff, a lot of challenges, a lot of suffering, it has also created an unprecedented opportunity to finally support accelerated energy transition efforts. And we can see that through the EU Green Deal, but also specific packages that the countries have developed, that a lot of countries are using this momentum to support low carbon energy transition. And here I would really like to say something about low carbon energy transition and the myth of that being costly and somehow, bringing only extra costs, not the additional benefits. And I would really like to use the recent calculations that have been done as part of the NDC, Nationally Determined Contribution process in Macedonia, that show that in case of North Macedonia, 70% of the greenhouse gases reductions can be achieved actually with the negative costs. So meaning the benefits outweigh the costs or the savings surpass the investment. Furthermore, additional 20% reduction can be realized with the reasonable cost, so to say, which together makes the case that decarbonization pathway is cheaper than the current policy pathway. So this is really, a serious demolition, so to say, of the myth, but also a serious investment and business opportunity, because the investments needed for the implementation of this decarbonization scenario are 7.7% of the GDP, annual average GDP, and private sector share of investments, total investments needed for the implementation of the policies and measures in the industry sector is 85%. So what is here the bottom line? The bottom line is that low carbon energy transition is a business opportunity, as greenhouse gases reduction can be achieved with negative costs, and that post-COVID recovery measures and the EU Green Deal are actually supporting this low carbon energy transition. The second point is that the lion's share of investment is coming from the private sector. So actually the private sector should be devising strategies how to capitalize on these opportunities, because the first movers will have the concessions, the support will have the advantage, and then afterwards it will become a norm. So the second point I would like to make is that concretely when we talk about climate change, recognizing this opportunity, also UNDP devised a program, a global program, which is called UNDP's Climate Promise, but it's actually support to the countries to enhance their climate actions under the Paris Agreement. So on the ground in 150 countries, we are supporting them. And this has actually concretely in Macedonia resulted in increasing the nationally determined contribution to 51% in percentage reduction in GHG emissions, and devising a specific Macedonian specific approach that was based on identifying the drivers of change and the scaling up for maximum impact that fits the national context and also fits both requirements UNFCCC and EU. So when we talk specifically about Macedonia, what's very important to mention that it has been calculated that by 2030, 8,000 new jobs should be created, and by 2035, 10,000 new jobs. And these jobs are in a retrofit of existing residential buildings, 42%, construction of passive houses, 21%, and renewable energy solutions without incentives, 6%, and solar thermal collectors, 8%. So this is quite an opportunity, again, and quite a business case. And then the connection between COVID and climate change, again, comes into play because at least 12 measures of the enhanced NDCs are directly linked with the government post-COVID economic plan. And most of them are in the energy sector, 70% of measures, but in the energy broader sector, only 8% of them is in the energy production sector. So this is just, again, giving you the bigger picture at the country level, what type of commitments are made and what type of efforts need to be made to attain these commitments, to attain these targets, and kind of channeling your thinking to somehow see yourself in this opportunity, either as a policymaker or as a business person, and see how does this big picture affect me? What are the threats? What are the opportunities? What do I do with it? The next element is the EU Green Deal. So it was envisaged before, but it was very much then influenced also by the post-COVID economy and the need to do low carbon energy transition. So what the Europe is aiming at is to be climate neutral by 2050. Very important point, decouple economic growth from resource use and then leave no person and place behind. When we are talking specifically about North Macedonia, we actually have that to align with the EU legislation, so broader EU legislation, there is 3 billion euro investment expected in the next 10 years, or 300 million euros per year, which is 2.8% of the GDP. But what is interesting is that it also has been calculated that green energy has the best potential in terms of important synergies for job creation, technological upgrading, human capital development, and industrial restructuring. So again, for MSMEs, for all the companies, huge opportunities in terms of where do I see myself in these 300 million, how I can capitalize, how I can turn this into a business opportunity, and how I can make sure that I'm in the first movers and getting the advantage, because otherwise it will just become the norm. Just very briefly on something that is near and dear to me, but in this particular context, it's only to give you that there is full alignment between country, EU, because of the EU accession agenda, very relevant for North Macedonia, but also the global agenda. Global agenda and SDG, unlike MDGs, Millennium Development Goals, are universal. They're applicable to all countries, developed and developing. And these three goals that I've singled out show you where globally the community, the society, world, economies are supposed to go. So it's about affordable, sustainable, modern energy, resilient infrastructure, innovation, urgent action to climate change. And something that is also very important to mention in terms of the alignment with the EU agenda, or alignment of EU agenda with the SDG agenda, is that there is a principle which is leave no one behind, which very much corresponds to something that is leave no person and place behind, and which is concretely supported by what's called just transition, a mechanism that I think EBRD representative will be talking more about, which is about making sure that the transition happens, but also those that are negatively affected are somehow captured and provided opportunity and do not become the losers, because if they do become the losers, they would be the big obstacles to the change. And then the last thing, since I'm talking about the big picture, I only stick to that. We all know about digitalization. We've seen it at work in the context of COVID, and how certain companies have been able to immediately pick up and move to the e-commerce, to the e-services, and some haven't. So just in that big picture, the value of the data economy is expected to triple in the next 4 years in this case, because this was done in 2018, and the number of data professionals is expected to double in the next 4 years. So this is again giving you in these 5 elements that I'm trying to present, the digitalization, EU, like how the things are moving and what you need to think about, where do you need to invest, where the future lies, and how do you adjust the business opportunities. So as I said, the point of my presentation was to really give you the big picture, to hopefully you start thinking about what are the pieces of the puzzle. How do I navigate as a business person, as a policymaker, as an international organization, to make sure that I fully capitalize on the opportunities and I remove or avoid the barriers or help those barriers being removed. Thank you very much for your attention. And of course, I'm staying and I'm available for questions afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanya. Indeed, there might be questions to you later, but now let's move to our, I would say, main presentation. And I will give the floor to Sasha Panevsky, who will present the results of the study he has done. He is the main author. And it has been quite, I would say, quite an adventure. A lot of work, and I think we have a very good result. While Sasha is presenting, here is my suggestion. If you have questions, please put them in chat, and you can put them in either English or Macedonian, and I will be able to handle the questions in English. I hope that Sasha later will help with the questions in Macedonian. So for right now, we start. Sasha, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Oleg. Just a second to share my screen. So, со оглед на настанот, би сакал да продолжам да зборувам на македонски. Моето име е Саша Паневски, како што ме представи Олег, јас сум консултантот на УНЕЦ кој што беше одговорен за изработка на оваа студија, но исто така и дел од тимот на Центарот за енергетска ефикасност на Македонија, МАЦЕ. Која беше потребата од оваа студија? Улогата на микро, малите и средните предпријатија во испораката на енергетски ефикасни производи и обезбедувањето опрема за обновлива енергија може да стане клучна во фазата на закрепнувањето по COVID, доколку им се обезбедат необходните стимулации, за да го поминат овој кризен период. Ова може да биде еден од начините да се помогне во рестартирањето на микромалите и средните предпријатија или дури да се создадат нови предпријатија кога можностите за работа ќе бидат подобрени. Микро, малите и средните предпријатија може да имаат корист од јасни насоки за пристап до финансирање, пристап до пазари, до напредни технологии и општо поволно окружување создадено од владините политики и законодавства. Тие исто така ќе имаат корист од конкретни примери за успешно спроведување на мерките од страна на микро, малите и средните предпријатија, вклучително и од пренаменување, кој што може да доведе до значителни економски придобивки. Затоа се обидовме да разгледаме неколку успешни примери и врз нивна основа да изведеме неколку препораки кои што мислиме дека би можеле да помогнат. Во тој поглед, содржината на презентацијата, но и методологијата генерално на извештајот кој беше подготвен, ја гледате на следниот слайд. Најпрво беше анализирано новото окружување со кое се соочија предпријатијата како последица на пандемијата, како и влијанието на пандемијата врз нив, а со цел да видиме кои би требало да се приоритетите за закрепнување од кризата. Потоа беа разгледани и преземените мерки од владата, беа разгледани најдобрите практики во областа на енергетската ефикасност и обновливите извори на енергија, како и практичните мерки кои предпријатијата ги преземаа за време на кризата и, како што напоменав, врз база на нив беа донесени одредени препораки. Па да почнеме. За да се изврши анализата за влијанието од пандемијата врз микро, малите и средните предпријатија, направена беше една мала анкета во која што учествува околу 35 компании и дополнително уште неколку состаноци. Со оглед на статистичкиот примерок, овој извештај своите наводи ги темели и на претходни истражувања, за кои што ќе слушнете малку подоцна на оваа работилница. Не се обидовме да ги освежиме податоците и податоците кои што ги добивме се следните. На овој слайд можете да го видите влијанието кое што го имаше кризата врз секојдневните активности на предпријатијата. Мора да се забележи дека кризата негативно влијаела на дури 73% од компаниите, додека 10% од компаниите ја поминале кризата со позитивно влијание, што дава надеж, нели? Но и тоа е поради нивното прилагодување на новите пазарни услови, како и зголемената побарувачка на одредени производи и брзата реакција на компаниите. На следниот слайд можете да ја видите отпорноста на предпријатијата на оваа криза, но и општо како тие би реагирали на други кризи, нели, Со оглед на тоа што се работи за микро, мали и средни предпријатија, како што може да се види на самиот график, отпорноста на предпријатијата е мала и најголемиот број на компании не би можеле долгорочно да се одржуваат во живот во ваков кризен период. На овој слайд можеме да го видиме начинот на работа на предпријатијата за време на рестриктивните мерки и може да се забележи дека доминантниот начин на работа е со делумно работење кој има свое влијание и на извршувањето на обврските, например да се приоритизираат само најважните проекти со цел да се одржи компанијата во живот. На следните два графици можете да ги видите мерките кои ги преземале компаниите наспроти нивното мислење кои би требало да се приоритетите во поддршката од владата. Како што можеме да видиме, најчестата мерка која ја преземале компаниите е намалување на работните часови, пренамена на активноста на интернет, додека повеќето компании сметаат дека владата треба да им помогне со помош за плата, даночни олеснувања и гарантирани заеми. Како што ќе видиме малку подоцна, тие беа и мерките кои што беа применети од нашата влада како поддршка на микромалите и средните предпријатија. На овој слайд можете да видите една временска линија на преземените мерки, односно пакети на мерки кои што беа наменети за поддршка на микромалите и средните предпријатија. Првиот пакет на мерки беше донесен кога беше прогласена кризната состојба и тој вклучуваше распределба на заеми преку Развојната банка. Но набргу потоа беше донесен и втор пакет на мерки кој што вклучуваше и мерки за да се одржи ликвидноста на предпријатијата, бескаматни заеми, како и месечна поддршка на граѓаните кои изгубија работата како резултат на кризата. Во третиот пакет содржаше мерки кои што беа насочени како кон граѓаните, така и кон предпријатијата. Мерките кон предпријатијата, значи имаше дополнителни мерки кон предпријатијата од претходните пакети за создавање на нови пазари, зголемување на конкурентноста и слични мерки. Во четвртиот и последен сега пакет представени беа и нови мерки за најпогодните сектори, како например туризмот. Средствата и земите издвоени од заделовниот сектор досега се главно насочени кон зачувување на пазарот на трудот и субвенционирање на изгубените приходи поради преземени превентивни мерки. Ова, иако е праведен и храбар чекор, нормална реакција за да се справиме со негативните ефекти од кризата, но преку овој извештај се обидуваме да дадеме препораки и размислувања за да се искористи кризата, за да се подобри општата состојба на микромалите и средните предпријатија и при тоа да им се обезбеди поголема отпорност за предстојните неповолни ситуации. Најдобри практики во областа на енергетска ефикасност. Најпрво да погледнеме една од најдобрите практики во секторот на опрема, во секторот згради, се работи за систем за управување со хотели. Ова најдобра практика вклучува создавање на алатка за управување на хотели и е насочена кон одржување на правилата за социјално дистанцирање, обезбедување на јавното здравје, а при тоа зголемување на квалитетот на услугата на сместувачките капацитети. Преку неа може да се оптимизираат и енергетските системи во објектот, а преку таа оптимизација и оптимално користење на енергијата да се постигнат и значителни заштеди. Енергетска ефикасност во секторот индустрија. УНИДО и РЕД спроведуваат еден долгогодишен проект во државата наречен катализирање на трансформација на пазарот за индустријска енергетска ефикасност и забрзување на инвестициите преку најдобрите достапни практики и технологии во Република Северна Македонија. Искрено лично, според мене, ова е еден од најдобрите активности кои што се спроведени кај нас, затоа што преку проектот се обучуваше експертски кадар кој што недостасува во сектори кои што експертскиот кадар недостасува, се обезбедуваат алатки и практично се потврдува знаењето на терен преку изработка на проекти, а тие проекти се вистински случаи и многу помогна во индустријскиот сектор. Например, конкретно за време на кризата, проектот се фокусираше на системите за компримиран воздух, кој на индустријата им обезбедува оптимизација и намалување на потрошувачката на енергија, кој има значителен удел во вкупните трошоци на компаниите. Практично се покажа дека примената на мерките кај системите за компримиран воздух имаат огромен потенцијал за намалување на трошоците, што е битно за време на криза, а при тоа повратот на средствата е релативно кус, а и инвестициите не се значително високи. Учесници на овој проект досега за компримиран воздух беа фирмите Тито Анусија, Конфиенджел, Алкалуит АД Скопје, Кнауф и ДС Смит. Замена на конвенционалните возила со електрични возила. За време на рестриктивните мерки, угостителските компании беа значително погодени. Продолжи да работи доставата на храна и генерално тоа беше нивната единствена активност. И за таа цел мислам дека малку пред почетокот на пандемијата, компанијата City Food Group се замени својата флота на конвенционални возила со електрични возила и според резултатите од таа замена, трошоците кај нив се намалени за дури 91% во однос на трошоците за гориво на конвенционалните возила кои биле користени претходно. Како што можете да видите, заменети се 7 електрични возила и 6 електрични скутери за достава на храна. Пренамена кон истражување и развој. Последниот пример за енергетска ефикасност е насочен кон пренаменување на своите активности, во конкретниот случај кон истражување и развој. Поради тоа на овој проект, кој воедно го водат Интербако заедно со Машинскиот факултет Скопје и Мацев, истакнато името на Мацев, кој на измодрен начин со пренаменување на своите активности кон истражување и развој на иновативен прототип на енергетска единица на органски ранкински циклус, успеа дури да го обезбеди својот раст во време на криза. Во однос на примерите за обновливите извори на енергија, ќе издвоиме развој на 2 продукти и една примена на обновливи извори на енергија за да се намалат трошоците и да се зголеми конкурентноста на микромалите и средните предпријатија. Компанијата Детал Велт разви филтерска постројка за ПМ честички, која како извор на енергија користи мала ветерница и фотонапонски панели. Оваа постројка, откога ќе се задоволи својата потреба за енергија, испорачува и енергија за останатите процеси, со што исто така ги намалува и другите оперативни трошоци на компанијата. Трансформација кон 100% зелена компанија. Компанијата ProPoint инсталираше фотонапонски систем со капацитет од 425 киловати за задоволување на сопствените потреби и зголемување на својата конкурентност. Мора да се напомене дека оваа компанија има визија да се трансформира во 100% зелена компанија и затоа ова е само дел од мерките кои таа ги презема во таа насока. Развој на сончеви сушачи за зеленчук и овошје. Компанијата EcoSolar развиваше постројка со зголемен капацитет за сушење на зеленчук и овошје, која потребната енергија ја добива со помош на сончеви колектори. Компанијата оваа постројка веќе ја нуди како дел од своите производи, а нејзините карактеристики можете да ги видите на слайдот. Освен најдобрите практики, разгледувани беа и практичните мерки кои компаниите ги преземаа, а врз база на нив донесени беа и препораки за успешно справување со кризата. На следниот дел ќе ги разгледаме препораките и пропратните практични мерки кои биле преземени. Препорака: зголемување на искористеноста на иновацијски фондови и програми. Успешноста на Фондот за иновации и технолошки развој за време на кризата покажува дека тоа е еден од најдобрите начини да им се помогне на компаниите, особено во пренасочување на своите активности и во развојот на продукти со зголемена бараност, например, во време на криза. Овој фонд имаше 3 повици во изминатата година, од кои едниот од тие повици беше директно насочен кон справувањето со пандемијата. Препорака: зголемено искористување на преференцијални заеми насочени кон енергетска ефикасност и обновливи извори на енергија. За таа цел го насочивме вниманието кон заемите кои што се достапни и беа достапни пред кризата преку Развојната банка, насочени кон обезбедување кредити и други форми на поддршка, обезбедување поддршка за развој на мали и средни предпријатија преку обезбедување на инвестициски кредити, како и обезбедување, осигурување на побарувања врз основа на извршен извоз во краток рок на комерцијалниот ризик. Условите за овие заеми, кои што се насочени кон енергетска ефикасност и обновливи извори на енергија, можете да ги видите на следниот слайд. Препорака: создавање на партнерства за полесен пристап кон пазари и поголема искористеност на јавните приватни партнерства. Како практична мерка за ова го потенциравме проектот создавање на услови за реализација на ЕСКО проектите, преку кои се подготвуваат неколку тендери за реконструкција на јавното осветлување. До сега се спроведени 2 тендери и карактеристиките можете да ги видите во следните табели. Препорака: зголемување на видливоста на интернет, нормално нели со сите рестриктивни мерки кои што беа воведени за чувувањето на јавното здравје со социјалното дистанцирање, неопходно беше да се компаниите да се навикнат на новата ситуација и да го зголемат нивната видливост на интернет. Не треба да потенцирам колку е битна оваа препорака. затоа што можевме да ја видиме нејзината важност, но ќе пробам да ви го насочам вниманието на една интересна практична мерка преку која компанијата AgroSolar создаде алатка и платформа преку која корисниците можат да добијат техничка поддршка од далеку во ситуациите нели кога техничката поддршка е можна за сите ситуации каде што не е потребно техничко лице да отиде на лице место. Сите нивни муштерии можат да добијат техничка помош, а воедно нели нивната продавница и ги понудија своите услуги онлайн. Препорака: организирање на обуки за време на рестриктивните мерки, како и за време на пандемијата, добра можност е зголемување на сопствениот капацитет или пак нудење на обуки за други, затоа што тие можат да се спроведуваат безбедно нели од далеко. Како пример за оваа препорака го издвоивме проектот Трейни, преку кој се организира обуки за информатичко моделирање на згради или познато како BIM, преку кој преку неговата примена можат да се постигнат одредени придобивки какви што се економски, заштеди во време на градење, помали трошоци, помало одржување, исто така придобивки за животната средина, помалку отпад, оптимално користење на енергија, но секако и одредени социјални придобивки. Наредната препорака е пренасочување на активностите, поради тоа што во новото окружување се создадаа услови за развој на различни, нели имаме други продукти кои што има зголемена побарувачката и така натаму. За таа цел, например, компанијата CSP Tech формираше стартап преку кој ги насочи своите активности кон истражување и развој на, да речеме, концентрирана кула за сончева енергија. И на тој начин го обезбеди својот раст. Наредната препорака е продолжување на инвестициските планови за енергетска ефикасност и обновливи извори на енергија. Оваа препорака, која што не е на врвот на, да речеме, листите на повеќето компании, затоа што бара дополнителни инвестиции, но во секој случај може да ги намали драстично нивните потреби, како за енергија, така и да зголеми конкурентноста на компаниите, и така да се обезбеди растот и да се помине оваа криза. Например, јавното предпријатие Пазари Битола успешно го продолжи својот инвестициски план од 2019 и покажа дека преку оваа мерка кризата беше успешно пребродена. Ти инвестираа во фотонапонска централа за покривање на сопствените потреби, ги заменија сите светилки со LED, поставија нов систем за централно грејење, дополнително имаат и план за реконструкција на фасадата, нели од кога ќе се добијат соодветните дозволи. Врз база на согледување на потребите на компаниите, на микромалите и средните предпријатија, можевме да дадеме одредени препораки до владата за како нели да се создаде поволно окружување за компаниите да ја поминат кризата и дури по можност да пораснат. Препораките до кои што дојдовме беа зголемување на поддршката за новите бизниси, намалување на данокот за енергетски ефикасни производи и производи од обновлива енергија, воведување или зголемување на користењето на зелените набавки, се постават протоколи за комуникација помеѓу владата и компаниите, најдобро преку деловни здруженија, преку стопанските комори и така натаму. воведување на мерки за енергетска ефикасност и обновливи извори на енергија за микро, мали и средни предпријатија во националните стратегии и акциски планови кои го опфаќаат секторот за одржлива енергија, воспоставување на фонд за енергетска ефикасност и обновливи извори на енергија, зголемена транспарентност во процесот за примена на субвенциите, давање фокус на производи за енергетска ефикасност и обновливи извори на енергија во достапните програми, како иновацијските фондови за микро, малите и средните предпријатија, и да се создадат јасни насоки за достапните мерки и решенија кои компаниите можат да ги спроведат за да издржат нели кризата, воедно дури и можат и да искористат кризата и новото пазарно окружување за да пораснат. Ви благодарам.
Thank you, Sasha. I think it was quite an informative presentation, and we already have a few questions. They are in the question and answer part. So Sasha, if you could look at it, there is the first one from Nicholas Holodov, an expert from Georgia. He asks you to explain in more details what kind of positive impact, somewhere on your slides it was 10%, the COVID-19 pandemic had on an enterprise.
Well, the positive impact, I can accent that it was mostly, as I see the situation, based on the new market environment, companies that develop good strategies about the products that are in higher demand because of the pandemic and had a quick reaction to the market change.
Okay, thank you. If that explains it to Nicholas, then all fine. If not quite, then Nicholas would write it down. There was a comment from Ivan Petrovsky regarding the UNIDO project. I think it is quite clear if people read it. If there is anything that you would like to comment further, please.
Yes, thank you. And I agree with Ivan. There was a training of experts for implementation of energy management systems, and that had huge savings that were achieved with low and no cost measures in major industrial enterprises. And we focused on the compressed air systems because it happened during the crisis, and with the assessments and help to the industry during the crisis, you know, it was clear how it helps them to the crisis, but it's a larger project with several areas that were included and etc. Thank you.
Thank you, Sasha. Now I have seen a hand raised by Nizamedin Rahmanov. He's an expert from Uzbekistan. If our moderators could give the floor to Nizamedin, if he still wants to ask a question. I'm not sure he's, maybe he dropped off. I don't see him. Okay, we'll come back to that if he rejoins. Using the opportunity, there was a question from Kankana Dubi to Sanya on her presentation. Maybe if Kankana could ask directly, because I'm not sure that what is right now in the chat is quite clear. Can we give the floor to Kankana for a question?
I think I understood, but of course, you know, Kankana can ask directly. Please go ahead.
Hi, thank you for all the presentations. Very, very interesting. Just a quick question. Sorry for the background noise. There's some work going on. I just wanted to know, when you said decoupling of economy, how do you see MSMEs getting involved in decoupling the economy, because it'll require more than the fiscal measures. It would need a market, and then that also means there's an impact on exports, imports, and various other, even energy efficiency regulations and things like that. So, and also most importantly, consumer acceptance to pay the price for that. So if you could just expand that a bit, and if I can take a moment again, I would like to refer to the presentation that we just had. I'm sorry if I get your name not probably, but Sasha, it was really nice presentation. Just a quick question to you as well, that when you talk about the recommendations to the government, where do you see the roles of suppliers and industry startups when we are talking about energy efficiency, technology development or innovation? That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kankana. So I will start with a bit of a bigger picture. So when we are talking about decoupling, there are basically 3 dimensions which are needed to be fulfilled for decoupling to happen. So it requires some economic structural changes. It requires relevant policy framework, technological advancement, and then enforcement of environmental regulation. So without these 3, you simply do not have the environment. This is why I was mentioning the Green Deal, the nationally determined contributions, because they are creating that environment so far in terms of the calculations and the policies that should follow. But what will actually play out in the market will also depend on whether that is enforced and whether an equal playing field is created. For MSMEs, I think in terms of decoupling, it's important to have what's called double bottom line. So to look at the investments in terms of I'm saving energy, I'm going towards the renewable, because this is the subject of today. We can talk about many different things, but like I'm saving on energy, I'm applying energy efficiency measures, I'm going for renewable to have renewable supply for my own business. So this is already creating a double bottom line for you. And that can be clear decoupling. You're reducing the consumption of what can come from the thermal energy. You are contributing to the renewable energy production, and you are saving on the costs. So this is where definitely decoupling of the growth of the company from intensity of the use of resources, including generating CO2 emissions. I'm trying to be concrete because of the subject, but you know, we can talk much more about this.
So I think that there was a question directed to me, and I'm sorry if I didn't quite get the question, but what I see with startups and energy efficiency and renewable energy sources, there were several programs that are focusing on entrepreneurship at the moment and technological development, and several percentages of the applicants were aimed at energy efficiency and renewable energy sources. Due to the influence that energy efficiency and renewable energy sources can have on the pandemic, lowering the cost, increasing the competitiveness, and so on, I think that maybe some focus in these programs on energy efficiency products and renewable energy sources products can be beneficial for the micro, small, and medium enterprises.
Okay. Thank you, Sasha. There is one more question. It is in Macedonian in the Q&A from Emilia Saravska. And my suggestion is if you could answer that question, and then we go to our discussants, Andrei and George.
So, ќе го одговорам прашањето на македонски. Вака, тој пример го земавме како добар пример, нели, извлековме убава препорака од тој пример, но други примери од Битол немавме разгледано. Но секако се надевам дека ако имате добри примери, слободно испратете ни ги на нашите контакт информации на имейл за да ги разгледам.
Thank you, Sasha. I would like to give the floor now to Andrei Dodonov. As I mentioned earlier, Andrei is the main author of the initial report that covers the whole UNEC region. So what we asked Andrei to do today is to give his impressions of what Sasha has done and also what the Macedonian experience could bring to other countries in the region. Andrei, you have the floor.
Dear colleagues, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be as a part of this workshop, and today let me make a short reflection for this study. First of all, I would like to thank you to all of the colleagues, especially Sasha, for such good, actual, and very useful study, which is customized for Macedonia's terms. This study was developed, as I already told, for Macedonia region, detailed and customized for this region, and includes practical information. Analysis of COVID environmental terms, and let me maybe emphasize in the beginning that environment actually for all of the countries which conclude in UNEC member states more or less the similar, but the recommendation as well as the practical measures which been realized on the governmental level or directly by private companies, MSMEs, are different. So because in the initial research, we consider three regions: Western Europe, Balkan region, and Central Asian and Caucasus region. So three different regions. Nevertheless, this presented study includes the analysis of COVID-19 environment, which is more relevant for Macedonian terms, as well as for my perspective, it has more value, the best practices of MSMEs which are working in field of the energy efficiency and renewable energy, and how they adapt in local terms to the new environment. The research includes also government measures as well as the practical measures and some conclusion. As Macedonia is not exclusion, the world health crisis caused by COVID-19 has forced Macedonian government, as well as for any other countries, to take some drastic measures. So administrative business shutdown, quarantine, and restriction of mobility and social contact. As a result, MSMEs have a reduction in their revenues. This is the same financial commitment to all of the engaged stakeholders, starting from end user, supplier, employees, customer, and etc. So from the analysis of this study, it is possible to identify the main key direction of influence of COVID-19 to the proper operation of the companies. So first of all, this is the shutdown impacts, supply chain disruption, and demand depression. And as a consequence, the manufacturing sector, which is more integrated in supply chain, faced the decline of more than 30 or 40% overall, includes all of both of three regions, more than 30 or 40% of production output. Manufacturers of building materials, construction materials, metals, electrical or engineering equipment are among the most affected by supply linkages. Service industries have been hit the hardest. This is the strongest impact on travel, tourism, food services, and retail trade. So, from this study, I would like to emphasize following background, which should be considered for support of the best dissemination process. First of all, production of companies who were heavily reliant on logistics for their operation were affected. More than 40% of MSMEs actively promoting their products on social media platforms during the lockdown period. More than 40% of MSMEs have access to different international development organizations and programs. It makes sense, especially for the Balkanian region as well as the Western Europe, because the situation is the Central Asian countries is slightly different. So industries not directly affected by COVID, but get indirectly affected by a shortage in customer demand. After pandemic, companies also started makes priority of their activities and trying to make an additional value-added services. So companies have also introduced work from home for their employees and increasingly digitized their business. So companies have also started focusing on projects related to the fight against the pandemic. This provides an additional stream of revenue and allows company to have access to the international development grants and programs. Retrofitting for improved energy efficiency can lead to significant savings for MSMEs by reducing their energy consumption. So energy consumption data from unoccupied building can be also collected, then almost everyone is working from home for benchmarking. Associations at regional and national level have previously supported their respective members in globalization, finding vendors or new customers. This model can still be replicated at the time of pandemic. And conclusion that might be drawn from the analysis of presented case study in this work. So many MSMEs have adjusted to the new normal of a remote working condition and social distancing. Availability of various funding programs which could be used to financially stabilize the MSMEs or startups. Delaying in the non-essential and non-priority project to some future date is also a way in which the crisis could be mitigated. Virtual online activities for MSMEs become the most important. Some of the MSMEs have repackaged their products and have branded themselves as a health tech startup aimed to fight the pandemic. So there are main conclusions, and that's maybe all of the things which I wanted to emphasize. And from my from my perspective, this is the last point, because I have found one very important point. At the time when we finalized the research, we start like many other companies who did not include into the research started to send their case study. So, and each case study provided by different company from different sectors are unique. And actually, in my perspective, such experience should be distributed among the similar companies. Doesn't depend on the country or region. Is that does the company located in North Macedonia or located in Georgia and Tbilisi? So in my perspective, if the technology process or some structure or like some structure or business operation are the same, it takes a real significant role, like a lesson learned for the other company, how to replicate the gained experience from the similar company, example giving from North Macedonia, to try to convert own production or use for any other repurposing items or something like. Dear colleagues, thank you very much. If you have any question, we could discuss in open panels. That was my reflection. So this research is very interesting and customized in regard to the Macedonian terms. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrei, for this reflection. Before I give the floor to Georgia Bulashvili, very quickly, there have been questions about the presentations and the materials from this workshop. They will all be posted on the UNECE website, and well, Sanya will also say whether there will be links on the UNDP website, but definitely on the UNECE website. We already have the guidelines and best practices, the study itself, in both English and Macedonian there, and we have Sasha's presentation in both English and Macedonian. The rest of the presentations will be posted, I would say this week. I cannot promise today, but definitely this week. Now, George, so you are doing a similar study for Georgia. And now you have seen what Sasha has done for North Macedonia. Some reflections on your side. What are the similarities? What are the differences? Can there be value in exchanging this experience between the countries? Thank you.
Thank you, Oleg. Thanks, Sasha and Andrei, for providing well-structured information. I would say that yes, it's easy to conclude that the problems faced are quite similar at each level and in each country, but the approaches in the COVID pandemic, in avoiding of the COVID pandemic, based on the strategies individually developed by countries, could be different, and based on that, the recommendation could be also different. But the recommendation may be differ in between at the level of at the top level or the country level, while recommendation for the MSMEs acting in renewable energy efficiency might be quite identical. Let me share my slides. I hope you see them. Could anyone confirm that?
George, go ahead. We see your screen and we see it in the presentation mode.
Perfect, thank you. So I will not stop on the methodological approach. The issue in the country we face is that we do not have strong definition of MSMEs. There are two alternative definitions. One which is in the legislation, tax codes, and another one which is close to the European one, and you see it on the screen, based on the statistical office definition. And this provokes quite some mismatching of information while analyzing overall sector of MSMEs. But this may not be important at this stage. I will demonstrate few findings and a few recommendations which are developed based on the study conducted in Georgia. But I would like to underline that we are at the earliest stage compared to the North Macedonian study. I think this study is more or less done. So due to the absence of the statistical information for the last 2 quarters of 2020, you can see on the screen that the turnover for the MSMEs altogether, not only in MSMEs acting in renewable energy and energy efficiency, decreased by 25%, and almost the same decrease we have in the fluctuation of the employees by the MSMEs. Those informations are extracted from the different international or national studies conducted in the country. As for the targeted reviews we've conducted among the MSMEs from the target sector, we observed that 23% of the MSMEs didn't change their production line, while almost 70% decreased their production by 70%. 40% of the companies we are forced to sell their assets. The salaries or the wages for the employees were decreased in significant amount of the MSMEs working in the renewable energy and energy efficiency. Although bank liabilities will remain more or less on the same level, and maybe some around 7% of the companies have increased their have widened their credit line. Most of the companies interviewed, they stated that claimed that although there were some government assistance received, the benefit, real benefit, tangible benefit, confirmed by the 13% of the companies only, and 70% companies claimed that these benefits were not really well tailored and focused. About 50% of the companies working in the sector, they claimed that they faced some problems due to the problems arise for transportation, international transportation of the goods and the raw materials. And 13% of the companies actually were forced to stop because of their supply routes were closed temporarily or fully during the lockdown periods of different countries, or lockdown periods of the different countries and different borders. So I will not stop on the key conclusions. They are more or less same what we have here from North Macedonian case. The only difference we faced is that during the pandemic, due to the social, while elaborating social support package, government introduced subsidizing of the energy bill for the population. There are stage subsidization process proposed, and also subsidizing of energy bill for particular business operators, mostly operating in food processing and food production. With that, that was another kind of barrier raised in front of the renewable energy efficiency business units. Because of this, this had decreased even severely market demand on their products and services provided. So on one hand, the overall energy consumption was decreased due to the pandemic and due to the change of the modes of the operation, not only in the country, but worldwide. But aside to that, because of the government announced the subsidy program for the energy bills, both for gas and natural gas and electricity, the demand dropped down radically on the market for renewable energy and energy efficiency products. Based on the findings and assumptions, findings and analysis we've conducted, we've developed following recommendations that may differ, as I mentioned in the very beginning, from the recommendation, specific recommendations for the Macedonia. But those differences comes from the national particularities of the country regulations and the environmental. Clear guidance on development of benefiting state subsidy programs and state support programs has to be developed. So there are a number of subsidies, and there is no any one window or one document where you can go and find what what activities and support programs, national-wide or international programs covering Georgia, are available for Georgian MSMEs, including the ones working in renewable energy and energy efficiency, and considering the nature and the value of scale for MSME, where there are very few employees, they are not capable to dig into any newses and put those newses together in order to analyze and identify the right national programs to apply for. So another recommendation is that the government, together with the National Bank, have to develop regulations and then guidance for the commercial banks. The commercial banking sector remained the only sector in Georgia who kept more or less at the same level of the profits that was before that they were claiming before the pandemic. So I think the new regulations or guidance to be developed by the government and National Bank to soften the load on the business and protect their and protect the businesses from the bank liabilities, and at least postpone some of the banking obligations businesses are facing on. Temporary abolishment of the taxes could be proposed by the government. As an example, property tax, while the businesses were locked down or were removed from the original sites of operation, and properties were not that much used for the economical benefits of the companies. This property tax has to be abolished for the temporary period of the lockdown, for the period of the lockdown. Tax breaks reduction has to be proposed for SMEs that more relevant for other type of the taxations, like in profit tax and so on. There are some initiatives already at the place, but those initiatives mostly goes for the benefits of the medium and large companies rather for medium and small companies. Government have introduced a number of national support programs with preferential operational areas. Unfortunately, neither renewable energy, non-energy efficiency, or clean technology companies are prioritized, and we include our recommendation that those companies with mentioned activities has to be prioritized in the existing national programs. Rather than subsidizing energy bill for householders and food producers, the same amount or part of the amount has to be directed to the extending of the market and subsidizing or allocating of grants for the renewable energy efficiency technology. With that, government may receive keeping or stimulating the market, and meanwhile the end users may benefit with the decreased bill at the same time with long run period. The recommendations I have in red, they are kind of major recommendation. There are another recommendation, the recommendation that goes to the MSME sector. It's quite, let's say, popular now establishing of clusters or association of the different sectors for MSMEs, and I would say that clustering of renewable energy efficiency operators will really help them in sharing of the overhead expenses they are facing individually for marketing, for setting up of the new modern online tools for selling their products, and or for overheads, traditional overheads like business modeling, like accounting, and so on and so on. Procurement procedure development is an essential development of the strategies for SMEs could be one of the products for the renewable energy efficiency cluster that will focus on the local or locally available raw materials used for production of renewable energy and energy efficiency service, rather depending on the market's distance suppliers and less reliable suppliers due to the fluctuation of the stability of the supplies already faced during the pandemic period. Unfortunately, we all know that we have to live with COVID-19 and we have to learn how to keep our traditional operation and more than that, increase our traditional operation, go slowly from unsustainable to this sustainable and clean energy technologies. And I would say
George,
that
George,
yes.
I'm sorry, we're a little bit over time.
Okay,
Could
this
you
is last
please
slide and
wrap up? Thank you.
Yeah, this is last slide and last sentence from my side. I think without medium and development of medium and long-term strategies for stabilization of and increasing and stimulation of renewable energy efficiency activities within the country, the single short-term solution may work against to the long-term stability. This is all from my side, and sorry if I took more than expected.
Thank you, George. There are a couple more questions for Sasha, but we are a little bit late with our agenda. So I would like to now pass the baton of a facilitator to Sanja Bojanic for the second part of our workshop. And Sanja, the floor is yours, and you handle the other speakers, please.
Thank you, Oleg, and I'll really try to be brief, not to take myself the time. I would only like to introduce Alexander Stoikov, professor, who is collaborating with Undp on a lot of initiatives, but more specifically, there was an EU study who was looking at the development model of North Macedonia, how it fits into this EU accession process, and very recently into the socio-economic impact of COVID. But this time, he will be talking about some aspects specifically for MSMEs, impact of COVID, but more emphasize the opportunities for SMEs to contribute to sustainable green recovery and economic development. So Alexander Stoikov, thank you very much for being with us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Sanja. Do you see the presentation?
Yes, we do.
Yes,
you just
okay.
put it on the full screen.
Yes.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a great pleasure to present today, and I express my deep gratitude to the organizers, to the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe and UNDP. I enjoyed the previous presentations, and I would like to add that when you talk to CEOs, managers of large enterprises, regarding the pandemic-induced recession and economic recovery, they usually say, it is more important to save the large enterprises. New SMEs will emerge anyway. Or they say, if we, the large enterprises, close our businesses, then SMEs will shut their businesses too. So we are more important. Let me briefly demystify these myths and oversimplifications, at least for our countries. The presentation is organized around 3 themes: context and relevance, pandemic impact, and opportunities and challenges. As you mentioned, the analysis here is a segment part of the socioeconomic impact assessment by UNDP conducted in 2020. As in many economies, micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises are very large and important segment of the economy by many parameters. They hold strong potential to bring inclusive growth, the one shared by many, and green growth, environmentally sustainable. For instance, in the Macedonian economy, MSMEs employ nearly 75% of all employees in the business sector, and 99.7% of the businesses are classified as MSMEs. So, but it's a very diverse sector, and as you can see, there is a dominant presence of the micro enterprises. By definition, this sector suffers from several limitations, such as their smallness and newness. If you manage small enterprises, your limited resources make you particularly vulnerable to external or internal shocks. And if it is a new enterprise, most likely you will have very big problems with access to finance. The pandemic recession in 2020 added few more problems like lockdowns, social distancing, and dramatic fall in sales, which led many firms to near survival. If it wasn't for the government financial support, the situation would be a bit more miserable. Existing evidence suggests that, and microdata suggests that the bulk or the largest share of the government financial support was used by large enterprises. Even before the pandemic, MSMEs showed signs of vulnerabilities. We had identified this in the UNDP socioeconomic impact assessment. Many micro and small enterprises were heavily indebted with low liquidity, and especially micro enterprises faced problems like negative net working capital, and there were widespread losses among these type of companies. So the sector was very vulnerable in unfavorable condition even before the pandemic. One large and very credible survey of SMEs in October last year across Europe revealed that the main obstacle for our MSMEs were the high interest rate on bank loans, insufficient collateral or guarantee, and they stated too much paperwork. Of course, the problems are more or less the same across our countries. Very large segment of MSMEs in our country and in Serbia reported that they have no obstacles to finance. And this is an encouraging fact, at least from this survey. To summarize, the main problems were the dramatic demand decline, the poor access to finance, payment delays or enterprise arrears, in addition to standard problems like regulatory obstacles, administrative burden, uncertainty about the future trend, and very interesting, some enterprises stated that the lack of skills of their employees was a limiting factor. The pandemic impact in our economy was very strong. The output, cumulative output losses for last year and this year are estimated to be at least $3.7 billion, and the largest net job losses are concentrated in manufacturing and other service sectors. In terms of the size, a large survey, enterprise survey, revealed that medium-sized enterprises are hardest hit. By type of economic activity, retailers experienced a decline of 22% as opposed to other services minus 36%, and domestic firms reported greater problems, dramatic decline of sales compared to foreign firms. When we merge data with from two databases, we see that the hardest hit economic sectors were those with more MSMEs, manufacturing, trade, construction. Regarding the government financial support, the survey reveals that the government support reached about 40% of the firms, and out of these 40%, 95% of the firms received some form of wage subsidies. In general, firms are satisfied, although there are still complaints that the support has been mainly given to large enterprises because they were not well acquainted with the criteria, or they didn't have sufficient time to prepare the documentation. How did our SMEs adapt it to the new normal? In addition to labor layoffs and reduced hours of work? Well, by delaying payments to suppliers, landlords, and to tax authorities. This initial reaction to the shock is expected, but how do we proceed? How do we adjust for the medium term? So let's talk now more about the opportunities and the challenges for the period of economic recovery. As McKinsey highlights, many SMEs, MSMEs showed remarkable flexibility, adaptability, and some of the successful business transformations, successes, but also opportunities were connected to going digital. As Sasha Panevsky explained, some companies turned to online sales and delivery. They embraced new technologies, enhanced partnerships, and redefined their digital strategies. So successful stories here include, but are not limited to, also to use of artificial intelligence, some new techniques, machine learning algorithms to improve sales, online courses for clients, employees, and improvement of digital platforms. Here are a few examples about the expansion of digital presence and how some companies immediately organized online sales in order to adjust to the new normal. The next large opportunity, as mentioned by Sanja and by other speakers, is the green transition, or transition to a low carbon, resource efficient economy. At least for our country, this will be facilitated by large IPA funds from the European Union and other international development partners. And those will help firms save energy and materials, something that cuts to the core of the circular economy. Many businesses state the compensation argument. They say, we are underdeveloped country and we have other priorities than environment. We fight for survival after all. And many industries are lobbying to postpone clean energy transition and adjustment to climate change. I would like to stress the point made by Sanja, our deputy resident representative of UNDP, that this transition is inevitable. With or without us, it will start. Our country adhered to the green agenda for Western Balkans, and there will be a higher demand, stricter legal requirements, and significant grant opportunities for investment in small innovations, renewable energy infrastructure, smart digital technologies, renovating buildings, as we saw, to strengthen the energy efficiency, support for the adoption of energy efficient practices, etc. And although a distant future, the treaty, let's say, between EU and the Republic of North Macedonia concerning the EU accession would impose significant costs for businesses. These costs will be related to imposed limitations on emissions of volatile organic compounds due to use of organic solvents, limitation of emissions of certain pollutants into the air from large combustion plants for each polluters, so firm by firm with specific targets. And instead of waiting for the very end, it's best, as Sanja mentioned, to jump among the first and reap the largest benefits. As long as there is a great support by the international donor community in the coming period. So innovations in process efficiency, product design, waste disposal, use of recycled materials, infrastructure efficiency are more than welcomed and will most probably be supported by donor grants and or government subsidies. Of course, our business representatives here will say easier said than done, and I fully agree with them. To conclude, the support for female entrepreneurship is also another opportunity, especially for MSMEs led by female entrepreneurs. There is growing consensus that female entrepreneurship deserves stronger support by the government, by the international development partners, and even without this support, there is evidence that woman empowerment is generally found to be positive for private sector development. Also, another speaker, I believe, Andrei, mentioned that internationalization of MSMEs is another opportunity with the digital tools, with the e-commerce. An enterprise can expand the market, can reach a wider group of customers in the region, extend the presence, and this is a growing trend that is happening, especially within the developing economies. And lastly, given the problems of access to finance, it's very difficult to grow when you're small. So in our country, there is government support, broad or gender targeted. So many firms can apply to make their vision reality. I hope I stick to the 10 minutes allocated. And once again, thank you for your attention and for the invitation.
Thank you, Alexander, very much. Pretty much on the mark. And if you can stop sharing your screen, it would be great, so that we can give the floor to the next speaker. So two next speakers are from the EBRD, a very important player in terms of supporting private sector, but also having an important role in what's called just transition. So first, I would like to give the floor to Dragana Marjanovic to talk about EBRD and ILO joint report, some of the findings, some of the broader picture, and then we would hear more about the EBRD's Just Transition Initiative. Dragana, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Hi, thank you very much, and welcome to everybody. And it's been a long couple of hours behind us, so I'll try to really be brief. And in fact, the research that the ILO and the EBRD conducted initiated actually a full year ago. So it was really, the idea was to do a really rapid assessment of the impact of the COVID pandemic on the world of work in general, with a particular emphasis at identifying sectors and enterprises at risk, but particularly focusing, and this is something that I find new in listening to all of these presentations, which actually brought a broad array of details and more accurate and more recent information about the impact of the crisis on enterprises, is really focusing also on the impact of the crisis on various categories of workers. It's really important to note that not all will be impacted equally and are impacted equally. So this is something that I think it's worth highlighting, and that I'd like to, and that I'll be addressing a bit later on, but also something that I want to mention is really in the core of the just transition that Margarita will be talking about later on as well. So just to kind of give a broad framework that, yes, actually the idea to do this kind of, to form this task joint force and to work on assessing basically framing the national action to support workers and enterprises during the COVID actually emerged in North Macedonia. The ILO was active in a project there, and as the COVID crisis developed, basically there was a request from the side of the Economic and Social Council to really provide support in this respect. So we were able to act quickly with the thanks of the ILO coordinator. I mentioned him earlier when we were discussing, and really formed this task force as EBRD joined later on. And we can say that the main assignment was to really assess what are the likely employment and labor market impacts. And we did this in all of the Western Balkan countries. And also what we focused on were the plausible policy responses that the government and its social partners should consider. And yeah, I mean, the many data sources were used to do this analysis. Just to mention a few, we were looking at also an enterprise survey. We were looking at administrative data at sector level. The ILO has a no costing model, which basically estimates the number of working hours lost. But really, this data is now already perhaps a bit outdated. As I said, it was a really rapid response. We already came out with the first reports in April, May, really reacting immediately to the crisis and actually providing recommendations to the government of North Macedonia, which were adapted. For example, expanding the criteria for eligibility for an employment benefit, which then benefited all of the employers who lost employment all of the workers who lost employment during the COVID crisis. So maybe, okay, I can also mention some of the key findings in terms of which sectors were mainly impacted. Let me just say, so basically, 1 second, sorry, just to see the list now here. So we have found that 9 sectors have been strongly impacted by the crisis, and it was concluded that 40,000 jobs were at immediate risk. Our analysis showed that this was food and beverage services, retail, transport, warehousing, personal services, and food manufacturing, as well as construction and other related services in this sector. On the other hand, we found that, for example, over 82% of the companies reported that they were hit by the pandemic. And we found, conversely to the previous research, that actually it was small and micro enterprises that were most vulnerable. I heard just a second ago that your colleague from Undp found that it was mainly medium-sized enterprises. But as I said, these are also old data, and it will, I guess, also depend on the methodology. But again, coming back to the main point, which I would like to highlight really just in a very few seconds, and this is that always, when it comes to crisis, we always risk exasperating, the winners and losers, and it's always as a colleague of mine would say, the usual suspects that actually are most vulnerable: youth, women, low-skilled, part-time workers, own account workers, informal workers. And this is something to really bear in mind also in planning and programming future activities in the sector that you're looking at today, through initiatives such as just transition considerations, to really make sure that we and when we talk about innovation and digitalization and greening, these all come with separate and new sets of skills that are required and demanded from the workforce. And it's really easy to actually omit and skip those that are in a certain way disadvantaged, and that may then find additional exclusion from these new ways of working, so to say. So I'll pass the floor on to Margarita, who will tell you more about the way we plan to address these issues through our just transition work. Thank you.
Dragana, thank you very much. And Margarita, with this introduction, the floor is yours. Thank you very much for your participation.
Hello everyone. I have a few slides to share. Hopefully I manage. Do you see my slides?
Just share screen. You are a panelist, so you should have the rights.
Yes. Do you see now? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
So I know that we are running out of time. I will try to be brief, but the idea is to give you an overview of the Just Transition initiative that we developed at EBRD. So the vision is really that the Just Transition aims to ensure that the benefits of the green economy transition are shared while protecting vulnerable countries, regions, and people from falling behind. We know that the Paris Agreement has set a goal of limiting global warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius compared to pre-industrial levels. And it is clear that to honor this commitment, we will need to rapidly scale up and speed up the actions to reduce the risk of climate change. This transition to the green economy will lead to new economic opportunities, for sure. But we know that it will also create stranded assets and displace jobs and threaten certain livelihoods. So there is a need to address the social costs of the low carbon transition. And it is really at the core idea of the Just Transition initiative that aims to ensure that the benefits are shared. The EBRD is particularly well placed to provide this type of support, which is at the nexus of the green and inclusive dimensions, because of our expertise on both the working on the green economy in transition, as well as on working on economic inclusion. So, for example, since 2006, cumulatively, our green finance has reached 34 billion. So, with quite a number of projects. And the same on the inclusion side. We have financed over 230 projects so far, worth over almost 11 billion and more. On the economic inclusion, we focus on underrepresented regions, women, youth, migrants, women-led SMEs, for example. We have this unique approach where we work with the private sector as our clients. On the green side, we are working on converting high carbon to low carbon assets. We have extensive experience on addressing skills mismatches through reskilling and upskilling programs, as well as policy dialogues with representatives of business sectors, policymakers, civil society organizations. Specifically in supporting potential small and medium-sized enterprises the EBRD commits donor funds to our Advice for Small Businesses program, which provides services to around 2,000 SMEs in 30 economies, 30 of our countries of operation, including North Macedonia. We have also scaled up our work on green and gender, with a number of flagship programs in partnerships with different climate investment funds. And we do so by working with clients to provide financing and capacity buildings and enhance women uptake of low carbon technology, employment and entrepreneurship in the green sector, by promoting access to green finance and entrepreneurship for women in particular in our economic inclusion team, but also more broadly for SMEs. So as part of this initiative, we did an initial stock take exercise where we looked at the literature and we tried to identify what are the key lessons that will also support our operations going forward on the initiative. So a few really highlights here is that even though we might not have all the answers now, and we know that this working on just transition approaches will need combining both short-term and long-term strategic thinking, and we might not have the full picture yet, we cannot delay action. We have to start now, because lead time is really crucial to build consensus around actions to be taken, to overcome resistance, build capacity for implementation, create local ownership and coordination at all levels. There also need to support strong institutions with capacity building efforts at the local level as much as the national one. And the support should be sustainable through sustainable and inclusive policy designs and investments. There is a strong role for the state in terms of strategy and resources, but the role of the private sector can also be transformative. And this can be through supporting small and medium enterprises. And at the state level, planning should be holistic, so always addressing multifaceted regional development issues and considering also pre-existing inequalities. Decarbonization should be encouraged across different sectors, as further carbon lock-ins would create new losers, and environmental legacies must be addressed. It is also crucial to support workers, both those that are directly impacted by the transition, as well as those indirectly impacted through new jobs, reskilling, upskilling, supporting access to entrepreneurship, employment services, career counseling, and access to financial resources. And the policies should be closely tied to the needs of the local labor markets and tailored. And so also economic diversification strategies need to be tailored to the specificities of the affected communities and the needs of the local businesses there. And we have to consider that in some cases a managed retreat might be needed. So we have structured our initiative across 3 key themes. Those of the green economy transition, supporting impacted workers, and regional economic diversification. And we have proactively tried to identify investment and policy activities that can accelerate impact across these 3 dimensions. On the green economy transition, EBRD will work with clients with high carbon assets in the transition to a low carbon economy. This includes targeting the reconversion of assets, remediation and rehabilitation of land, and a range of other green investments that can create access to local employment, such as supporting green access to green financing for SMEs. On the theme of supporting workers, the bank will promote access to alternative jobs for those whose livelihoods are affected by the transition process through reskilling and upskilling within the context of understanding and addressing underlying drivers on inequality. On regional economic diversification, we emphasize activities that provide employment, including supporting competitive SMEs and larger firms, as well as financing of projects in sustainable infrastructure. So these three broad themes have different objectives that are matched to relevant indicators that you see here on the slides, with specific benchmarks that reflect ambition and are monitored throughout the project lifetime. So for example, we have a few benchmarks for financing to SMEs or entrepreneurs here, specifically in terms of regional economic diversification, but also in terms of how many workers will be assessing market relevant skills, including entrepreneurial skills as part of the second pillar on supporting impacted workers. Then another key priority for us is also to support strategic planning and engage with different actors. And this is something that we are supporting in North Macedonia specifically. Beyond these three, the three pillars that I was talking about before, it is important to contribute to normalize support for transition planning and regional economic development strategies. So how to also institutionalize the process of regional development planning. There is a need to support evidence-based policy learning and pilots with feedback mechanisms. So we are trying to conduct a few pilot just transition diagnostics in a selected number of countries across the Western Balkans to assess regional transition challenges and opportunities. And as I said, North Macedonia will be our first pilot countries, possibly followed by Serbia and Bosnia. This diagnostic will provide an overview of the green economy transition process in the country, including the timeline for key steps under different green energy transition scenarios. And it will identify the vulnerable regions as well as the groups within those regions. It will also include an assessment of the related socioeconomic and environmental impact of the different scenarios, including their labor market impacts and what are the economic diversification opportunities. This sort of screening and assessment exercise will go hand in hand with the development of a just transition action plan that will cover recommendations for enhanced institutional and governance structures, required policy reforms, and also a list of possible investments that could be targeted in this initiative. And for us, working on this is really important also the stakeholder engagements, the link between the private and the public sector, where we are particularly strong at EBRD, involving any key stakeholder in a participatory way, because this is also at the core of the just transition, that the process is inclusive, linking the national institutional context to the local needs and specificities, and collaborating with other MDBs. In working on this, we have to consider the additional challenge of COVID-19 and the need to build back better. So closing equity gaps, which the pandemic is widening and is going to widen, will be crucial across regions in a country, generations for young and older workers, and a broader spectrum of workers with different abilities, irrespective of their legal status. We know that disadvantaged groups such as women, youth, migrants are more likely to work in service industries, and this is similar to what Dragana was saying and are more likely to be affected by lockdowns or the pandemic itself. These activities often take place in regions where there are fewer alternative sources of employment and connectivity to the rest of the economy is low. So we really need to put an inclusive focus into each reactivation and recovery effort with support for employment readiness initiatives such as skills development activities and sector alignment. And this will be key to consider also as the starting point for this Just Transition initiative, which by the way just was launched last year. And similar challenges are also in terms of supporting and scaling up green investments, which are currently under threat given the needs that the crisis response brings. And since the challenge is becoming more complex because of the long-term dynamics of the green economy transition, as well as the COVID-19 crisis, we really think that partnerships will be key here in delivering on our ambition on the Just Transition work. They will help ensure systemic transition and additionality of all actors involved in the process. Of course, we are very keen and ready to work with the EU, which has its own Just Transition mechanism. And there we will be guided by the territorial plans that the member states are developing as part of the Just Transition Fund and mechanism. But we are also working with the European Commission, the World Bank, and the Energy Community Secretariat to operationalize the platform on coal regions in transition for Ukraine and the Western Balkans countries specifically. We are also leading a discussion at the Undp level, so with different multilateral development banks, on how we can operationalize more broadly and really globally this Just Transition, and as part of our work on the Paris Alignment Working Group. We also continue our strong partnerships with the European Training Foundation and the International Labour Organization, the ILO, to inform skills programs and policy engagements in this area. And we think that this promoting partnership will really be key in achieving our goals. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Margarita. You can stop sharing your screen so that we can see all panelists. Really, thank you very much. I know we are over time. I hope the interesting presentation and some interesting information that you were able to hear compensates for taking more of the time than was envisaged by the agenda. I would just like to point 4 points. Just after all of this, it was a lot of information that we heard. I really think what stems out is the important role of MSMEs for the Macedonian economy. It was in numbers like 75% of employees, 99% of all of the SMEs, all of the sector. So it's really important to know that. Then green transition will happen and opportunities are enormous, but there will be winners and losers. And MSMEs as most vulnerable can easily be the losers. But this is why it's very important to have a conscious effort at the level of the country, because at the EU level and globally, there are already efforts and initiatives and fundings, but I think it's important to translate them into relevant country-specific initiatives so that the relevant support in terms of picking up, really getting them up to speed, the most vulnerable, and making sure they can take advantage of the enormous opportunity is very important. And this is where EBRD, UNDP, UNECE, government, this is where our role is critical. So with that, back to Oleg to kind of facilitate questions and answers, if there is still patience for that, and kind of move that to the closure. Thank you very much. Thank you all thank you to the panelists.
Thank you, Sanya, and I would like to also thank our colleagues from EBRD. Those were very interesting presentations and very relevant. I don't know if we are now almost 10 minutes over time. Sanya, it's up to you if you would like to still have some questions on the last presentations.
I would like to open up because we still have 70 participants. So let's see, I don't see open questions, but if people want to ask, and if there was something in the chat that I missed, please bring it up.
There were some questions in Q&A. I believe there was a question to Alexander Stoikov, but he answered it. So if you want to look at Q&A, it is there. I have not seen questions to either Margarita or Dragana. But so colleagues, if you have any questions for the last presentations, otherwise there is still a question from Yasmina to Sasha that's related to the photovoltaic systems. Maybe Sasha could answer that one.
We don't have any available information about the preparation of that kind of study, but I asked in my answer to Yasmina that if she's willing to write us an email, we can look into that and try to find the answer.
Okay, thank you, Sasha. So I think I
don't see any specific questions, so we can close.
Okay, so this is. I find the event extremely interesting. It is intended first and foremost for those in North Macedonia, for people in the business sector, for MSMEs, for other stakeholders, for government officials, and I believe it served that purpose. But if you could look at the list of participants, we had so many people from outside North Macedonia, which means this is something really relevant and valuable for people not just in the country, even though this one was specifically focused on the national issues. And I think that's the main, I would say the main value of this workshop, that very specific issues, very specific matters, and very specific, not just challenges, but also responses that are available in North Macedonia. And once again, many thanks to our colleagues from UNDP and from the UN country team. We know that Lilian was not able to join us today, but she was also extremely helpful in organizing all this. Thanks to all the team, to Ivan and Dimish. Many thanks to Sasha and all other speakers and participants. And I would also like to express gratitude to our interpreters. We worked hard to make it possible, so the workshop was available not only in English, but also in Macedonian and Albanian, and it worked. So again, thank you to the interpreters, thank you to UNDP. I think it was a very good example of cooperation between the UN organizations, and it worked. And we also have some plans for some further joint activities between UNEC and UNDP. And let's hope, fingers crossed, that will come to fruition. Sanya, back to you.
Thank you very much. I would also like to add that we also have had great collaboration in the previous period with EBRD, and we hope to continue that collaboration and to continue exchanging experiences and, you know, adding to each other work, making it complementary, learning from each other. So today we heard about a very relevant initiative, and that it will be specifically, you know, applied in North Macedonia in terms of the understanding and how to do the just transition in Macedonia. So that's a very relevant initiative, and I really look forward to expanding the circle of collaboration with UN agencies and international organizations, because it will take a lot of effort to fully capitalize on the opportunities while not leaving people and places behind, and really making sure we have a just process and just recovery, just transition ahead of us. So with that, thank you all very much and looking forward to new opportunities to collaborate. Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.